inductees for the College Football Hall of Fame from Alabama. We're also going to talk about a very strange, puzzling, concerning crystal ball pick for an in-state recruit that Alabama desperately wants, but he may not be going to Alabama according to this crystal ball selection. We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Bama.
Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Jimmy, how are you today?
Excited. Boy, creeping closer. And boy, what a big recruiting week. I mean, this could be the biggest recruiting week of the year. Now, I know when I say that, that means someone is interpreting that to mean we're going to get multiple commitments this week. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean by the biggest recruiting week is there will never be a 7-day period all year where we have more kids than we want to sign on campus. That includes this week during camps and this weekend for official visits. It's the biggest weekend in terms of visitors coming to Tuscaloosa that Alabama wants to sign. Whether that's going to result in any commitments at all, who the hell knows? It's the strangest recruiting cycle of all time. Things will continue to be strange right up until the cycle ends.
Yeah, I saw you say that earlier to somebody when they were talking about Jaleel Hurley, but it's just, nobody knows what the hell's going to happen, so it's hard to predict anything. I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Bama the first place you listen when it comes to Alabama podcast. Also, Jimmy, let's go ahead and start with some news. College Football Hall of Fame 2023 class, 80, I think it's total of 80 guys up for selection, including coaches. And Chris Samuels, Antonio Langham are both up potentially to make the list. I think both of them should make it with relative ease. I mean, boy, if you don't think Chris Samuels should get in, I mean, he's arguably – I mean, you could say he's the second best offensive lineman we've ever had behind John Hannah. And, I mean, John Hannah's way before me, but his reputation is so big that I think you'd have to put John Hannah 1, maybe Dwight Stevenson 2. But Chris Samuels is in the top 5 all-time Alabama offensive linemen, if you ask me. And I think he's a no-brainer. And then Langham, I mean, Langham is still Alabama's all-time leader in career interceptions with 19. He's made some unbelievable plays, one of the most fabulous plays in Alabama history against Florida in that SEC championship game, pick 6 against Auburn that same year, a blocked punt for a touchdown against Mississippi State that same year. I mean, he was just a dude. He won the Jim Thorpe Award. Maybe he gets some points deducted for the cocktail napkin snafu, but I think both of them should get in.
Well, first of all, I certainly agree. Secondly, look, I haven't seen all 80 players that are nominated, and I haven't gone over all 80 in terms of, this guy versus this guy, and how many are going to get into the 80, and do you get on future ballots? I don't know how it all works. So I'm not going to pretend to say, these two are the most decorated of all the 80 that are nominated. I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is this. To me, players at Alabama that become significant players, and by that I mean starters, guys that play a ton, they're in 3 groups. The first group is by far the biggest, and that group is good players. These are players that have earned starting positions at Alabama during any Alabama era that started a whole season, maybe 2 or even 3 seasons. Anyone that's accomplished that is a good football player. You can't be a bad player and do that at Alabama, not even when Alabama's been average. Alabama. So most of the players that play significant roles at Alabama are good. There's a smaller list that's still pretty big, but a smaller list of what I would call great players. And these are players that stood out at Alabama. They were starters that became all-stars, that became they won things like all SEC, or they were drafted in the NFL, or they set records. They're great players. I'll tell you an example of a great player to me is Emil Ekiyor. That's just the first name that comes to mind. And by great, I mean Emil's going to be a 3-year full-time starter and drafted into the NFL And in his senior year, he's going to be the unquestionable leader of that group. And again, he'll play. So he's a great player, better than good. Now, the third list is small, and it needs to be small for it to mean a lot. But the third group are what I would call legends. I'm talking about better than great. I'm talking about these guys are great under any definition while they're at Alabama. And obviously, legends would be guys like Bryce Young, who's won a Heisman, Will Anderson, who may be the best defensive player of the Saban era. These guys are legends. And I say that to say Chris Samuels and Antonio Langham are legends. They're not just good. They're not just great. They're legendary players. These are two of the best players at their positions that's ever played at Alabama, including the Saban era for all you younger folks. So, yeah, in my mind, they deserve it because I think if you're a legendary player at Alabama, there's probably a spot for you in the Hall of Fame.
There should be. And Alabama's got a lot of Hall of Fame members. I won't run over them all, but AL.com had a nice rundown. And they're going to have a lot more coming up soon from this Saban era. I mean, you can just bet Devontae Smith's going to be in there.
All the Heisman winners.
Yeah, all the Heisman winners, Ingram and Henry and
Barrett Jones.
Barrett Jones would be in there.
He won an EGOT.
Yeah. I think, what the hell is an EGOT?
EGOT? That's a term they use in show business for the small handful of people who have won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. There's only there's only like 8 or 10 of those people in the world, in the history of the world, that have won all 4, and they call them EGOTs. Like John Legend is one. There's very few others.
I thought you were saying, like, if there's an award out there, he got it.
Both.
Yeah.
Both suffice for what we're doing here.
All right, let me tell everybody about Built Bar. Don't you love a chewy chocolatey brownie? What about a caramel brownie with caramel swirled on top? So good. What if I told you can have all that chewy, chocolatey, caramelly deliciousness plus 17 grams of protein? You're in luck because caramel brownie bars are available at Built.com right now. And you got to act fast because they're a fan favorite. I had one the other day. They're absolutely delicious. Forget about dessert. These are better than dessert. Plus, the macros are unreal. I don't know what macros are, but you probably do. 130 calories, 17 grams of protein, only 4 grams of sugar. I would replace a regular brownie with Built's caramel brownie in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. The best part, caramel brownies are covered in 100% real chocolate, like for realsies. And these are so good they made me say for realsies. With Built, tasty is the new healthy. Go to Built.com, get your box of caramel brownies bars right now. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, 15% off that order. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off that order. I also want to tell you, we have an important favor to ask of you. We put together a survey so we can learn more about our listeners like you and make favorite Locked On podcast even better, your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and what you don't like about Locked On Podcast. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes the survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10, I tell you, $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thanks for your help. All right, Jimmy, some recruiting news out there. And first of all, let's do the good news. Brandon Ennis came in this past weekend, superstar wide receiver, maybe the best wide receiver in the country, and he seemed to have a really good time at Alabama. Do you think we have a legitimate shot, or is this a USC no-brainer?
I don't think he's going to go to USC. I thought at one point he may be going to USC because he committed to Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley and then was immediately interested in USC. I think that's calmed down some. I think today he's more likely to go to Ohio State than anywhere. But Alabama made huge ground this weekend. And look, he's a wide receiver from South Florida. There are all sorts of reasons for him to sign with Alabama and not travel all the way to Ohio State. I mean, what are you going to get at Ohio State? You're not going to get at Alabama. And it's much closer to home. And with Alabama's track record at wide receiver, to say nothing of our track record at wide receiver with South Florida kids, Alabama makes all sorts of sense for Brandon Ennis. And I think maybe he realized that this weekend. So I think Alabama is in really good shape for him. But based on his comments prior, it's hard to bet on Alabama here. My money would be on Ohio State still, but I think Alabama is closer than ever, maybe to taking a lead for him, and I wouldn't rule Alabama out. And keep in mind, a 5-star plus kid like Ennis, he's going to get a lot of NIL opportunities, and that could end up ruling the day. So I would really hate to bet on anything, but today I would say it's Ohio State, then maybe Alabama, and I wasn't so sure Alabama was even second before this weekend. So Alabama is a riser here and has made it interesting.
I certainly would love for that to happen, and we are going to talk about some other recruiting news in this next segment. But Jimmy, as we're recording this for Tuesday's episode, this just came across the wire, and you may not even know it. This is so sad to me. Robert Stewart, who was a bruising, muscle-toned football star at the Houston County and then in Alabama, he passed away.
Yeah, heard that.
God almighty, Jimmy. He was only 55 years old, and I remember him very, very well. He played about every position outside of quarterback and kicker at Alabama, which was weird. I mean, it seemed like he was everywhere. And he was a freak athletic. He was like, you know who he reminds me of? He was a sort of a broader Shane Lee, but more athletic. You know, Shane Lee was just like this muscle-bound dude who probably had no real position. Robert Stewart also had no real position, except he was good at every position he played. I remember the A&M game in 1988. He had a monster game then in College Station, the Hurricane Bowl. He was just a dude, man. Boy, this is sad, sad news. Anybody who is in my generation will know the name Robert Stewart. He was an absolute dude, and that is so sad at age 55. I'm not even seeing the cause of death yet. Said details of the death were not available. He died Saturday morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he's lived since retiring from professional football. So, goodness gracious, that's just sad, sad news.
Really, yeah, Robert was in school. He was an older kid when I was in school, and he was, 2 or 3 years older than me. So, I never met Robert, but what a fantastic player and athlete at Alabama, a throwback. I don't think there could be a Robert Stewart today, at least in Alabama level, just because of how unique he was. But he's also played in an era where nose tackles were, you wanted a run stuffer at nose guard all 60 minutes of a game. You played a fullback. What's funny to me is fans get a trip out of, whenever you move a defensive lineman to fullback on the goal line. And we've done that with several players. Jonathan Allen did it. Deron Payne famously did it, even caught a touchdown pass. So we do this, and fans get a chuckle out of it like it's a novelty thing. Imagine this. Robert Stewart was a defensive lineman and nose guard. He's an actual nose guard who played fullback. He played fullback. It wasn't a novelty. It may have been his best position. He killed people at fullback, and that just shows what kind of a real athlete he was. But he also was a guy that was in an era was able to play nose guard very effectively at like 6 foot 280. And you wouldn't do that now. So. But what a freak. That guy could bench press 1 million pounds. He could run, pure football player. And hey, a lot of people talk about 92. The 91 defense was also really good. That team went 11-1 or 11-1, I think was their record in 1991, 11-1. And it was all behind a great defense because the offense was pretty iffy. But the defense was great, and Robert Stewart was a big part of that. So what I would say is, a great player on a great defense that wouldn't have been as good without him. So that's how good he was.
Jimmy, I'll go to my grave thinking that if they had called the sack Robert Stewart had on Shane Lee in Gainesville, which a safety, which it was, like they should have, then maybe Alabama doesn't get beat 35-0 in that game. Maybe they get beat 35-2. But
it was a closer, considering how badly Alabama was blown out. The game was closer than that score sounds. And you're right. That was early in the game. It was a tone setter.
Yeah.
The officials blew the call. It was way before replay. Officials blew the call. Should have been a safety. And that's what kind of player he was. a nose guard who was hell in the pass rush.
Let me read off this from the Dothan Eagle. An assistant was talking about how a guy from a coach from USC came in. Said a coach from USC. Oh God, my damn computer just acted up on me. A coach from USC came in. Oh my God, I can't believe that this just happened. Where'd it go? A coach from USC came in and sat down with us at Houston County High with Robert, myself, and I can't remember who else. You could have just left that out, Coach. He said, he introduced himself and said, son, I'd like for you to fly to California. We'd like to recruit you and like you to offer you a scholarship to Southern Cal. Robert looked at me and said, Coach, what do you want to do? I said, Robert, like I've told everyone who's come in here, it's your choice. I said, if you want to fly to California with a family, you want me to go, I'll go. This is your choice. He looked at me and smiled and turned around at that coach and stuck his hand out and shook his hand. He said, Coach, I've never been to California. I'd like to go to California, but I'm not going to go because if I go, I'm wasting the university's money. I'm going to go to the University of Alabama. You know, that's never, ever, ever going to be a recruiting story again. And that's just not the way it's ever going to be. And Robert Stewart was I think he was the epitome of what we all want college football to be. I'm not saying that the kids today are not good people. I'm just saying at that time, you went for the reasons we think you ought to go. And that we believe in our head people go to school for. And Robert Stewart just wanted to go to the University of Alabama. And boy, in 91, you're right, they was right. He wasn't on that 92 team. But if Robert Stewart could have been on that 92 team, and they had a pretty good lineup anyway. But can you imagine a nose guard of Robert Stewart and then Curry and Copeland? Holy hell. It's the best defense in college football history, if you ask me anyway. It would have been the best defense in any sports history. So, Jimmy, let me go ahead and take another break here. I don't have a live read. Amazing. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back in just a second. Want to tell everybody also go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. That's a lot of fun to listen to. And we got JD Davison out there, so you want to find out more about it, go make that your second listen behind Locked On Bama. Locked On NBA Big Board. Follow them anywhere you get your podcast. You can go to Audacity app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Go check them out. They'll fill you in on all the NBA stuff that you need to know. Jimmy, one thing that was concerning, and I'm doing the opposite of a managerial technique called the sandwich technique, where you say something good, then something shitty, and then something good again. I'm leaving the shitty stuff for last. Tamarian Parker was just crystal balled by one of your cohorts over at On3, Chad Simmons, to go to the University of, not Georgia, not Auburn, Florida. And I'm going to tell you something. Florida also just had Kelby Collins in for a visit. Billy Napier is making some headway, dude. And I mean, I'm sure they also have a lot of NIL money and all this other stuff. By the way, I just want to throw this out there. This is not appropriate for what we're talking about. Jaden Bradley, the point guard coming into Alabama, already has an NIL deal with Embassy Suites, which I thought was just a brilliant move, and I think is awesome. And I guess this happens the right way because he has already signed with Alabama. He's not on campus, I don't think. I mean, maybe on campus, but he's probably on campus. The right way that you're supposed to do it. But I love that move. What a cool move by Embassy Suites. But anyway, Tamarian Parker from Central Phoenix City, crystal ball to Florida now by Chad Simmons, Chad Simmons isn't Luke Robinson out there throwing shit against the wall. No. Sticks. Chad Simmons knows his stuff. So this is concerning.
Yeah, well, when Chad crystal balls somebody, you just go ahead and put it down in pencil. I mean, you know, not in pen, it's recruiting, right? But you can pencil it in. If Chad has made the projection, no one knows the recruiting landscape and these kids and these schools better than Chad. Look, I think in previous years this would be a bigger story, but it's not. It's not an earthquake for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's the weirdest cycle ever. There's going to be some strange results. Period. And we've got to get used to that. Okay, that everything that we've learned about recruiting in the first, in my case, the first 51 years of my life, that's all out the window. Flush it. This is brand new, and we've all got to get used to that. And it's not going to be easy to get used to, but we do have to get used to that. So that's one. Secondly, that position is stacked on Alabama's board, stacked with in-state kids, with kids from around the region, with kids from around the country. It's just really impossible for Alabama. I mean, you could take Tamarion Parker if you're Alabama tomorrow. Now you don't have room for Quay Russell or whoever it is that's above him on the board. There wouldn't be many names, but there would be several names even above him on the board. Malik Bryant, from Florida, is an edge player. I think, my take is that not that Alabama didn't want Tamarion, but that maybe Tamarion wasn't the priority for Alabama that you would think he would be. And trust me, in 99 out of 100 years, he would be. This is a highly unusual year in terms of how many quality players there are at that position. So I think between it being the weirdest cycle ever and Alabama's board just being stacked, I mean, Alabama already has Jan Pierre, who projects as a rush end. I mean, you can't take 6. You can't even really take 4. 3 is a stretch. Alabama's already kind of got 1, and they're still recruiting a Quay Russell, Malik Bryant, and many others, Kelby Collins. So, of course, he's more of a defensive lineman to me. But anyway, I think it's those things. So there's no reason to panic or feel like Alabama's dropped the ball here. I'm huge on Parker. I think he's going to be great. But I've said this from the start. There will be great players Alabama just simply does not have a room for in this group because the front 7 is just so crowded with really good players that have Alabama high on their list.
All right, buddy, that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back tomorrow. We're going to have John Garcia on at some point this week, so be on the lookout for that. John Garcia, of course, with SI.com, recruiting guru, one of the best in the business. Can't wait to talk to him about Tamarion Parker and more. We'll be back next time. Until then, roll tide.